Welcome to the Wings for Life podcast. I am your favorite captain, Captain Audie Johnson, and I'm here with two distinguished guests.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rick Legault. I'm the Director of Operations at the 139th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron. I've been in Aerovac for about 27 years or so, both as a medic, as a technician, and as an operations officer.
I'm Chief Osvald. I've been a member of the 139th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron for 26 years, currently the senior enlisted leader, and I've been here my whole career on all the deployments and in the positions of flight crew, AOT, command cell, all those good things.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you. So today we're going to talk about Aeromedical Evacuation 101, that is command and control. So we're going to get into the history, the structural elements of AE. We're going to get into some of the command control dynamics, and then we're going to talk through some experiences that both of you have. All right, let's get started.
Great.
So, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Legault, can you please walk us through the origins of aeromedical evacuation? How has it evolved?
Sure.
Walk us through that.
Sure. It's it's a long and storied mission that we're a part of, that we're privileged to be a part of. Militaries have been evacuating patients off of battlefields formally for centuries. Really got a little bit more formalized and was one of the reasons that Napoleon had so much success during the Napoleonic Wars in the French Republic, and during World War I. They had formal patient evacuation on pre-built train cars. It had beds in them, and medical personnel attended those patients. And then during World War I, we saw the early uses of this new invention, the airplane, and immediately at the end of World War I, during the Mexican-American skirmishes on the southern U.S. border, in 1918, the Army used one of their first airplanes, Curtiss Jenny, to transport patients. So patients would be out in a really remote area, they would be wounded, injured, and they would load them onto one of these airplanes, I don't think with any medical attendants, and fly them to where they could get help. That eventually, in the 1920s, became common use for border conflicts. Then in 1928, and this is really modern aeromedical evacuation, this is where it all starts. A woman named Ellen Church, who was very interested in aviation, was a nurse, approached Boeing Air Transport and said, hey, you're having a hard time getting people onto commercial flights as transportation. They're scared of flying. They don't understand it. What if we had nurses on the airplane to help make people feel more comfortable when they're flying? Boeing kind of bit on that idea in 1930 and allowed her to hire 8 registered nurses. And they worked as flight attendants. They were like the first flight attendants on commercial airlines. Now, this is obviously a little bit before World War II, but when the U.S. became involved in World War II, obviously at the very end of 1941, in 1942, Ellen Church helped the Army establish the first Aerovac school, the first aeromedical evacuation school at Fort Bowman, Kentucky. She led that. Medical personnel were assigned to air transport squadrons in the Army Air Corps, and they flew usually on C-47s. And throughout World War II, Aerovac, really what we would recognize it as Aerovac today, transported over 1.5 million patients. Over 1.5 million patients were moved, including not only U.S. and Allied soldiers, but victims who were found in the concentration camps in Germany were moved by Aerovac crews in order to get them the care they needed. So, and that became something that was recognized as a capability that we needed and is continued on in that basic format through today in the U.S. military.
Okay, just Guard and Reserve is a key component of this history and continues to be, with 90% of the AE enterprise being Guard and Reserve. Can you kind of walk us through and talk about what the role of Guard and Reserves is in the AE enterprise and how that takes shape and what it looks like today?
Sure. It's an advanced skill set. The aeromedical evacuation community is a pretty elite community. I had somebody trying to point this out to me on a recent deployment who said, there are fewer, qualified flight nurses in the U.S. Air Force than there are Navy SEALs. It's not a gigantic community, and it's an expensive endeavor to maintain. If you think about taking nurses, highly trained nurses and medics out of hospitals and other roles where they practice medicine on a regular basis in the Air Force, and sticking them in a squadron where they might not see that many patients, they might not treat that many patients, they might not handle, serious patient acuity on a regular basis, and just have them concentrate on flying. That's expensive in a lot of ways. It's expensive in money and resources. It's expensive in maintaining highly perishable skill sets. And unless we're in a wartime footing, we don't need that many people to fly aeromedical evacuation. So there are a lot of advantages that people have recognized over many years for having most of that capability in the Guard and Reserve. Our personnel come from a highly diverse background. Our nurses usually are really highly skilled and work as civilian nurses in their regular life and deal with pretty serious patient acuity. Yet the Guard and Reserve meet all of the same training standards as the active duty and spend a whole career in AirVac, so they've got sort of the best of both worlds, and it's a lot cheaper for the Department of Defense and the Air Force to keep that force ready and able to respond within 72 hours anywhere in the world when they're needed.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So you just discussed all the unique capabilities that Guard and Reserve bring to the mission. Chief, you've been flying for over 20 years. What does that look like for you in the AE system? How does your civilian experience kind of inform that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, on the outside, I'm a firefighter paramedic with the city of Albany. I've been doing that for 19 years. So all the training and experiences that I get in the city, like I got my paramedic certificate, I work as a street medic, years of experience doing those things. I bring that with me to the Guard, and then I take that with me when I deploy out to the field, and I am giving all that training and experience. I apply that to the care of the patients that we're moving. So definitely enhancing the care and capabilities of the things that we're doing out in the field. And then in addition to that, through the multiple deployments and all those experiences, and as I work in different UTCs like our command cell, when we're forming crews, I apply that to setting up a crew. I know certain Guard and Reservists will have advanced medical training, and active duty will have more understanding and knowledge of regulations. And when we're intermingling these crews or rainbowing them, we try to put all those different strengths together to give a better crew to be successful out in the field. So that's what I've brought to the table, and then that's how I apply it to the different deployments.
Interesting. So we talked about the unique capabilities of Guard and Reserve and AE, the history. Colonel Legault, can you please walk us through what the structure of overall AE? Who are the key players in the system? What role do they play in the structure in this very complex mission?
Right. Well, we've learned a lot over a long time, and like a lot of things, it gets more complicated as time goes on. Today, there's a lot of different ways to think about how this works when it comes to how do we fly and what equipment do we use and what are we allowed to do and not allowed to do. That largely comes from Air Mobility Command, from the MAGCOM that we work for. But when we're out there doing it and we're being directed and we're integrating with the aircraft that we use and deciding who needs to get picked up and where they need to go, that is coming from U.S. Transportation Command. They're both literally right next to each other at Scott Air Force Base. And then when it comes to all the things that we need to fulfill to actually put people and equipment on an airplane to do a thing, we're dependent on our local command and control, and we're part of the 109th Air Wing, and we work through that, the 109th Operations Group, right? And so it's very similar when you're deployed. Whether you're deployed or whether you're at home, you have essentially three pillars you need to fulfill, right? You've got what we call ADCON, or administrative control. How does everybody get paid? How do they get orders? How do they know where they're going? How do we take care of them on a day-to-day from all that administrative and personnel standpoint? How do we deal with any problems or other administrative issues? And whether we're home or deployed, that is either coming from, Air Mobility Command through the typical force structure. And if you're in the Guard and Reserve, also if you're deployed and activated, then you're also looking at things like the 201st Mission Support Squadron and National Guard Bureau gets involved. When it comes to operational control, where do we need to be and how are we moving people and where do they go? Do we have a bed for them at a hospital at the end? Do we have all the flights and airplanes we need to get them from A to B? How do we organize in order to do that? That comes from U.S. Transportation Command, right? And we call that OPCON, or operational control. They tell us where to go, get the airplane and which airplane to get on, type of thing, and tell us what our force strength needs to be in the field, because they see the big picture of the whole mission. And then lastly, you have to have some kind of TACON, or tactical control over actually making sure the crews are organized, the logistics happen, that they have everything they need, that somebody's there to call them up and say, go walk out to that airplane right now to take care of their immediate problems and decide what they need to do while they're deployed in that environment to take care of them and just do the day-to-day things that they need to complete that mission. So whether you're deployed or whether you're at home, there's some elements necessary of what we call, again, ADCON, TACON, OPCON. They've all got to be there for the system to work, and they're usually not the same people. So that's good. That's really important when you're thinking about running an aeromedical evacuation element of any size in the field, that you have to know who takes care of what and is going to solve what problem for you. So which boss do I call, right? And we need all of those pieces to make AirVac work at any given place or time.
Yeah, so any given day in the field, that aeromedical evacuation operations team is talking to a lot of different agencies and groups, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, you hope so. Sometimes they're not talking to each other,
Okay.
And you have to make sure that you get them talking to each other if they have some kind of mutual interest to help maintain your maximum mission capability while you're out there.
Right.
Yeah. The key to the success is communications and knowing who to communicate, and we're going to touch on this a bunch more as we go through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, now that we've kind of discussed that, I'm curious, Chief, can you talk to or walk us through what the decision-making process is like in a typical AE mission?
Yeah, absolutely. And everything we're talking about, there's different UTCs, right? I'm going to talk about AIAT and Command Cell. Those are the two different organizations that we, use for all of our tactical, making missions happen, right? Making these missions go off. And they have different perspectives of what they're trying to accomplish. So specifically with the AIAT, Aeromedical Evacuation Operations Team, they're the heart and soul of making missions launch and get recovered. So when they get tasked with a mission, a lot of stuff, I think what I'll refer to right now is like if we're trying to launch a Bravo mission, something that's unscheduled, going to a location you hadn't planned on, something along those lines. I think it's important to know, I always start at the end of the mission and walk it backwards. That's the key to knowing what crew you're sending, how many people you're sending, all those things. So looking at where the mission's going to terminate and how long that mission is tasked for, right? Because then you're looking at crew duty days, flight duty periods. So depending on that time, might change the number of people you have to send, right? So then if you're talking about changing the crew complement, how does that affect the rest of the crews you're managing? And then from there, you're looking about, okay, what's the takeoff time, right? Because that's what everything is based upon, right? We don't want to have late takeoffs. That makes us look bad. So takeoff time and keep going back to alert time, right? You start at the end, walk your way backwards till you get to the beginning. And as you've run into all the issues, right? How long, where, all those things, and you answer the questions. By the time you get to the beginning, you're said, and you've referred to your regs with information you may not know and found the answers, like, okay, we can make this mission happen. This is who we're sending, and this is how it's going to affect the rest of the crews that are there. So from an AIOT, that's how I look at missions and making them happen. And again, a big part of that is all along the way, talking to TACC for iron, right? Talking to ERPs. Do you know patients are coming or going? Looking at traces in G2 to make sure the missions are fragged, that the patients are validated or not nowadays, but all those things, you got to be using all your communication tools. And the email is probably ineffective for those because now you're at a time hack, right? You got to make things happen. So you got to be knowing who you're calling and have their phone number and calling them and coordinating things immediately.
Flexibility, right? Because not only can these missions change, but we're given within that tactical control, we're given a lot of flexibility in exercising our judgment to make sure that happens. So within the tactical control with the operations team and a command cell, if you decide I need to put more medics and nurses on the airplane because the mission's really long or the patients are more serious patients, you don't have to go to anybody to ask permission. You can just go to the chief nurse in that command cell and sign that off. Or if you're deciding who's going to go based on either the particular skill sets of crews or managing the crews to make sure you'll meet all the other missions you have to do. That's why you have a director of operations or an operations officer to help make those decisions and get it going. And the other thing that's important is, as far as flexibility goes, you can have an operations team that is a full operations team with 24-hour operations, managing up to 10 or 12 crews, and have 15 people as part of that to make it all happen all the time. You can also have an operations team that only has 2 or 3 crews or no crews and just gets their crews as they need them and have only 3 people. So the Air Force has designed this system for maximum flexibility based on what that mission's going to look like and what's needed, and can either change that capability to have more people that can do more or fewer people that can do less based on what they think is going to happen. It's just at the end, you still have to know who to talk to because you still have ADCON, TACON, OPCON coming from somewhere, right? So that is, I think, one of the really important keys to understand in this AE system. There's only a few things you need.
And what Colonel Legault is kind of what he's mentioning kind of falls in the lap of the command cell, which is the other perspective here, right? The things that they're receiving from above, right? Their operational orders outline what our bosses expect of our squadron and the AI and the crews and all that. So they take that information and they tell the AI, we need these things. Like one of the big items is how many crews do you need in Bravo at all times, right? So they tell the AI that I expect to have 2 crews in Bravo at all times. And if you get down to 1, you got to notify us and get the next one in within 12 hours or whatever it is, right? So the command cell is looking at the bigger picture, how they're going to accomplish that, tasking the AI to do that. And then the big thing is when there's issues, like all of a sudden all crews launched, right? Like 2 scheduled missions, 2 Bravos happen, we have no crews. what do, right? Notify the command cell, who then runs that up the chain of command, notifying. Again, it's all communication, letting people know that we've executed everything. We can't meet your operational order right now. Important for you to know, put someone else on alert, right? Because they're going to get tasked because we're tapped out right now. So command cell looking at the big picture, what's best for the squadron, meeting the operational orders, and channeling it that down and making sure it's happening at the tactical level.
Right, and it goes without saying you could have one command cell and a whole lot of operations teams spread out all over the place that they have to keep track of all of those capabilities and where they stand and whether or not they have the people, the resources, the time to be able to execute a mission at any given moment. So very important.
And this is a good segue into our sponsors.
Do you ever find you're too productive and the internet is too fast on base? Is your internet too fast? We can slow that down for you. Here at Air Force Internets, we care about you.
Bullshit.
Mother again. Gormley, is your internet working?
Yeah, no, mine's not working either. Let me try this. Oh, would you look at that? It started working. Ah, what the? Why isn't this working? Did you try Chrome? How about Firefox? Internet Explorer? Let's just downgrade you to Windows 92.
Ah!
Nice. Mouse doesn't work, so. Gobi.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. But can you give it a minute? It goes to space. Like, think about that. I'm not a guardian here. Alright, I'll look into it. Thanks.
This thing sucks. What the?
Let's restart at least 3 times before we contact the help desk.
Good afternoon, this is Captain Anderson. May I help you? Yeah, if you want to hold on just a second, I'll take a look for you. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It looks like our internet is down right now. You know what? Hold on just a moment, please, okay? That's good. I don't know if I'm able to get that information for them.
So it's important that we learn these different elements of AE so that, when we're called upon, potentially we have an opportunity to be on these teams. And because of the flexible nature of it, it's imperative that we know this, right? So because these teams work harmoniously, nothing ever happens.
That's why we're here, right?
So I want to know, let's talk a little bit about your personal experiences. Maybe some of those stories that you can share with us. Can you share a memorable story, Colonel Legault, where command and control played a crucial part in the success of an aeromedical evacuation mission?
Sure. So, it's one of the ways that we communicate. It's one of the ways culturally, I think in AirVac, we share information is we have these stories that are things where we learned something and we come back and we talk to each other and talk about that kind of thing. So, and I talked about flexibility, right? So AirVac is an amazing capability that is recognized not just in the Air Force, but through, the DoD and U.S. Transcom as a very valuable asset and they often quickly spin us up to do things we've never done before. So I was asked to go and take over a task force a few years ago in response to the COVID pandemic and moving high consequence infectious disease patients with entirely new equipment, entirely new sort of operational concepts that no one had ever really used before. And you never know what you're going to walk into when you walk in the door, right? When you go to take over something like this. And one of the very first things that happened after I took over this multi-million-dollar set of equipment and people and this big mission was getting a call from Tanker Airlift Command Center, which is U.S. Transcom, that operational command and control. They're the folks that issue our operational orders. They tell you, we're giving you the following resources and we expect you to be able to respond to the following things. Pretty basic, right? But that's how they think about it when they're organizing that big picture. We need you to cover this and we're going to give you this much to do it. And they wanted to change how aeromedical evacuation at this one Air Force base was organized because there were two separate sort of operations teams there. One for regular aeromedical evacuation, one for infectious disease transport in a way that we've never done before. And then we had some very non-traditional roles that we had to kind of make up as we went along to some degree of how we were going to run that tactically and locally. Like we had a training team that was responsible for training anyone who was going to deploy on the ground on this new equipment before they went anywhere. That's not normally something we do. We don't run training schools as part of an operational mission. It's very unusual. And so one of the earliest experiences that I had there was getting a phone call from U.S. Transcom saying, hey, we issued an operational order about 2 months ago before you got there. And the folks before you said, no, we're not going to do that. I'd never heard of that before. That was an entirely new. I didn't know that you got issued written orders from higher headquarters, and I didn't know no was an option. So I took a look at the who and what and where and why. And one of the things that I realized is that the folks who were there before me, and this is just a matter of sort of experience in the system and that kind of thing, no seemed reasonable to them at a local tactical decision-making viewpoint where they were and what they were doing. But there was not a lot of open communication between that operational control and the administrative control and the tactical control all the way up through to the squadron level. And we were dealing with an entirely new mission. Nobody had written a book on this yet because the book didn't exist. We were making it up somewhat as we went along. And so knowing that all of these different parts and pieces had a role to play in this and understanding everybody's considerations is what was important for implementing a big change. And it was a really big change. And so knowing and understanding that kind of put me in a position of starting to get on the phone and send emails and ask questions and document things and make sure that all of these different parts and pieces were not only talking to me and thinking that they're giving me the direction that I need or giving me the resources I need to do a job. It was making sure that I got them all to talk to each other and see how those pieces fit together at that level in the field on the ground doing that mission. And it was funny because once that happened, the whole situation kind of resolved itself within a couple of days and allowed us to write a plan that everybody was happy with and actually execute that big operational order that they thought was going to take months and get it all done in a space of about 2 weeks. With all the resource changes, location changes, changes in roles and responsibilities, everything happening at that tactical level in a very short period of time once everybody understood their parts to play. So that's not about our job of actually moving a patient, but it is about our job of being in a command and control position in the field and understanding not the regs necessarily so much as what are the roles and responsibilities and considerations of all the stakeholders in this area, and how do you bring that together to do the right thing? Very straightforward. And I think that's why, thank you to you for bringing us together to talk about this. That's why getting a fundamental understanding of this stuff and letting us, use that information to meet the objectives of the mission is so important.
Yeah. So knowing what the structure is, being able to take an idea, a concept, and go to those groups and ensuring that their piece and the mission is integrated into that plan down
All
to
of
the
it.
tactical level.
Yeah. What are everybody's considerations, and how do you make sure that they're met in order to be able to get out there and do that job? And
Absolutely.
what do they give?
Absolutely. How about you, Chief? Do you have a memorable experience that, or
I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to expand a little bit on what Colonel Legault was just talking about. Like, and this applies to every member in an AirVac squadron, right down from our senior airman to myself and every AFSC. If you get deployed out in an AOT and you're the duty controller on duty that day, and maybe you're all alone, right? And some Bravo mission is getting alerted and they're putting out information that's like, maybe and this can go either way. Like, number one, when you get the tasking, you should look at it like, okay, does it make sense, right? How long they're going to be gone? How long is this mission? Is everything that's getting lined up, does it make sense? And if it doesn't, say you notice the patient seems to be very severe injuries, whatever, and maybe they missed adding a CCAT, or the mission's going to be gone for 36 hours and they're just tasking a basic crew or a short crew. It's being able to recognize that something's wrong and then up channeling that, right? Like, obviously let your AAT OIC or the DO know, but TACC needs to know right away, like, hey, the crew that's going out can't complete that mission, or maybe they don't know for some reason all the planes left. Something funky happened, like, hey, there's no aircraft here right now, or, you need a CCAT, and you have to be able to channel that up and let them know something's wrong so they can correct it and then bring it back down. And part of it is maybe you know the answer, right? Say, hey, this crew can't go because it's short, but we have another crew that's in crew rest. It's an augmented crew in crew rest, and they're going to be available in 1 hour. They're going to be ready for alert in an hour. So within 1 hour, we could task them and be launching those things. So it's important for everyone in our squadron to know the people that they have to contact, be confident enough to recognize and up channel that information and correct it to make sure the missions go off correctly and safely.
Yeah, higher level command and control, they don't know what you see on the ground always. And if you expect them to always have all the answers instead of working as a team, that usually never works out. And it's not a matter of, well, why don't they know what's going on and why are, they don't. It's not that. It's giving people a little grace that we're all on a team together trying to get a job done. And so it just reminded me of another instance where we had a really weird request from TACC to put CCATs and all their equipment on commercial flights. I was deployed as a director of operations for AirVac in the United States. And they said they had no other way to get it to where it needed to go. And when I started looking in some of the systems, that are the same things they have access to, but just making sure we covered all the bases, working as a team. And I had folks in the operations team doing all the other tasks to make sure that no matter what, the end of objective, equipment and people in a certain place by a certain time was going to be met. I saw that there were some special air missions leaving our base and going near where they needed it. So I called them back and said, did you look at these? And they said, oh no, we didn't talk to them. Well, it's not like anything to get upset about, like, hey, how come you didn't do that? But it does mean that the knowledge and experience and access to information and creativity that everybody has, when they put all that together and open up that communication, that's what's going to help make the mission go and make it successful and make it as easy, as fast as possible. Because believe me, from a tactical command and control perspective, You would much rather take those personnel and all that equipment and put it on an Air Force cargo plane than figure out how to pack it up and put it on a civilian airline flight. So, you can't just assume that anybody has all the answers here. And you got to go back and forth with people to let them know what you can do and what's there and ask all those questions.
Colonel Legault, Chief Osfeld, thank you for joining us on the Wings for Life podcast.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, Captain Johnson.